Well, good morning, everyone. Have you seen Jesus this morning? If you haven't, you will. Oh, he's so good, and he's here. Oh, he's here. And we see him when we're not here, because it's him. The Aussie lumberjack. An Aussie lumberjack deep in the forests of the Australian bushland had the formidable task of clearing trees to open up land for grazing and production of food. He worked hard and he worked long. And as time went on, his axes needed replacing. The handles were broken, the blades were worn down from countless sharpenings. So he made the long and arduous trek into the city to renew and replace his prized possessions. When he got to the store, he noticed a sign out the front stating that there was this new invention that could be guaranteed to cut a minimum of 100 trees a day. Well, it caught his attention. That's fantastic, he thought. On my best day, when I'm feeling good, and I get up early and I go home late, the best I can do is 50 trees, maybe 70 trees, but never more. This machine is unbelievable. 100 trees a day minimum. So he walks into the store, arms full of broken axe handles with worn out heads, and he says to the store owner, "This newly invented machine, I think they call it a chainsaw, guaranteed to cut a minimum of 100 trees a day." "That's right," said the store owner, "guaranteed to cut a minimum of 100 trees a day." Well, the lumberjack handed over his axes and he said, "Look, I'll take one. You can keep the axes." The trip back to his log cabin deep in the forest bushland felt like a stroll in the park. So delighted was he in his newfound possession. The next day he couldn't get up early enough, delighted in his new purchase. But by the end of the day, he'd only tallied 20 trees. A bit dumbstruck, he went home thinking, well, that's odd. Nowhere near the 100 trees. Never mind. Fresh start in the morning. Next day, 25 trees. Better but not good. Never mind. Chin up, chest out. I'll just try harder. This continued over the next couple of months. He exerted more effort, spent more sweat, blisters turned into corns, blood into tears. He went through the motions. It began with blaming, even hating the shopkeeper for what he had sold him. "I've been had," he thought. Sold a lemon, a gimmick. Then his feelings of anger and hate turned to self-doubt and depression. Maybe it's just me. No good for anything. It works for others, but it doesn't work for me. So he made the long trek back to the storekeeper, anger and frustration mixed with a real sense of being let down and defeated. All his enthusiasm had been drained. He was dejected. He was spent. He walked into the store with the chainsaw. Handing it over to the store owner, he said, "You can have it back. I'll take back the old broken axes. Look, it doesn't work. At least it doesn't work for me." The store owner took hold of the chainsaw. It was obviously well worn, even abused, yet intact. A couple of checks, the lumberjack looking on with a head bent low in defeat. The store owner pulled on the cord. It started first pull. As he triggered the throttle, he looked up at the lumberjack, who stood with eyes lit up like saucers. The lumberjack stepped back, muttering the words, "What's that noise?" Have you ever felt that way about your Christianity? The promise of life, joy, peace, a life abundant and free in Him. You've taken hold of it with great joy and anticipation, but failure after failure leaves you disappointed and disillusioned. You might be angry at God. You exert more effort, more sweat, more heartache. You're frustrated, empty, dry, hollow, disappointed, spent. This Christianity, it might work for others, but it doesn't work for me. You have a few successes. You might chop down a couple of trees, but ultimately it's not working. You haven't tapped into the power of the chainsaw. You're doing all the work. We're going through Romans, and we're coming to a part where we look at God's judgment of us and where we stand with him. And as we go through the book of Romans, we'll find that Paul, by God's Spirit, is establishing three things. Number one, all are guilty before God. All. Number two, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. Number three, Jesus has done it all. Just let go and believe in him. So Romans 2 and verse 12. We're just going to go through the passage verse by verse. And so it's Romans chapter 2 and verse 12. It says there, for all who have sinned without the law will also perish without the law. And all who have sinned under the law will be judged by the law. Now the law is what was handed down by God and given to Moses. For the nation of Israel it was for the Jews. There were many sundry laws and ordinances, I think there was over 600 given, but it basically came down to the 10 Commandments, written on tablets of stone, which can be summed up in 2 rules. The great command to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind and all your soul. And then there was the golden command to love your neighbour as yourself. It all hinges there. Those who sin without this law, that is all non-Jews, all those who don't align with the nation of Israel, all Gentiles, that would be us. All who sin without this law will also perish without this law. All who sin who are under this law, the Jewish nation, will be judged by this law. And now all this is heading towards Romans 3:23, where it says all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Verse 13. For not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law will be justified. You know, to listen to the words of the law read to you, or spoken over you, or even if it's direct revelation from God, where you hear these words as if from God's own mouth, where you are convicted in your heart about them, this is not enough to justify you or make you righteous. It's not enough. It is the doers of the law who will be justified or declared righteous. The question is, how does one do the law? By the sweat of our brow? Chest out, chin up? Is that the solution? In the previous verses, we looked at those last week, or in our studies, in verses 10 and 7, we're told that it is those who do good that receive honour, glory, peace, eternal life. But how do you do good? How do you do good? How do you do the law? Later on in chapter 3, Paul is going to quote from chapter 14, and it's repeated again in Psalm 53. And it says this, there is none righteous that's justified, not even one. It goes on to say, there is none who does good, there is not even one. You can't do good and you can't do the law as God requires it to be fulfilled. It's not in you. In Romans 3:20, Paul says, by works of the law, no flesh will be justified in his sight. In Psalm 143 verse 2, David declares that in God's sight no man living is righteous. And no one knew this better than Paul after he was converted. Before Paul was converted, he strived with every ounce of his being to satisfy and fulfill the law. He rolled up his sleeves and he swung the axe by the sweat of his brow, and maybe he fell 70 trees a day. In Philippians 3 and 4 to 6, Paul writes this: "If anyone else has a mind to put confidence in the flesh, I far more." If you think you're good, listen to Paul when he was Saul. "Circumcised the 8th day, of the nation of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law a Pharisee, as to zeal a persecutor of the church, as to the righteousness which is in the law found blameless." That's how he saw himself. But this righteousness in the law he found to be a self-righteousness, a righteousness of his own. His coveting after his own righteousness made him a transgressor of the law, the command which says, "You shall not covet." Talking of his fellow Israelites, he says of them in Romans 10 and verse 3, "Not knowing about the God's righteousness and seeking to establish their own, they did not subject themselves to the righteousness of God." God's righteousness is God's action, his work, his power. Man's righteousness is man's action, man's work, and man's power. God's righteousness is divine. Man's righteousness is earthly. God's righteousness is holy and just. Man's righteousness is sin. Paul goes on to speak about the Gentiles who never received the law handed down through Moses. Where do Gentiles stand before God? Verse 14. "For when Gentiles who do not have the law do instinctively the things of the law, these not having the law are a law to themselves." So let's just unwind that a bit. My version's got there, "When Gentiles who do not have the law do instinctively the things of the law." Your version might say, "by nature do the things of the law." And that's quite literally what it means. By nature do the things of the law. There's a nature within us that guides us towards the nature of God, to reveal a law within us, written within us by God. A moral compass, if you like. Not written on stone tablets to be read out, but within, making us a law to ourselves. A law within by which we will be judged. Paul explains this further. We'll read 14 and then into 15. "For when Gentiles who do not have the law do instinctively the things of the law, these not having the law are a law to themselves, in that they show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience bearing witness, and their thoughts alternately accusing or else defending them." This law is written in our hearts. Who wrote it there? God. When was it put there? This nature within, this moral compass, this work of the law written in our hearts, is what all humanity has received. And we received it at our creation. The spirit or breath we have from God that makes up our being of body, soul and spirit. It's that spirit from God that shows us what he is like. We see it in Romans chapter 1 and verses 18 and then just through it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them." There's this evidence within, that spirit that we have from God when he breathed into our nostrils. "For God made it evident to them, for since the creation of the world," it says. We have a spirit that was given to us from God. And with it comes a conscience, which tells us or shows us, yes, that's right, or no, that's wrong. And on the basis of this law written within us, this moral compass that originates from God, we will be judged. And we will be judged as guilty, for we all know that deep within we fail, we fall short. You know when God convicts your heart about who you are and what you've done, we fall short. So for the Gentiles, they show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience bearing witness, and their thoughts alternately accusing or else defending them. On the day when, according to my gospel, God will judge the secrets of men through Christ Jesus. The secret or hidden part of us will be judged, our motives. They will be judged. Our motives within, are they self-motivated or God-motivated? Are they self-empowered or are they God-empowered? In the end, we will all find that we fall short of the glory of God, and we have all sinned. Well, that's all the verses for the morning. Should we end it there? The powerful truth of the gospel. There's some truths here. You grab hold of them. God will show them to you. You listen. You listen hard. Let His Spirit speak. When God created us, He took the soil which He made, mixed with the water that He had created. He took this clay substance of earth and fashioned it into a body. Into this corpse He breathed. The body received breath of His breath, spirit of His spirit. Now in the Hebrew and in the Greek, the word used for wind or moving air, breath, is the same word as that we use to translate as spirit. Now the context reveals whether it's one, the other, or perhaps even both. So we have body and we have spirit. Breath of His breath, spirit of His spirit. This spirit we received from Him, and it returns back to Him at death. In Ecclesiastes 12:7 it says that at death the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. That's why Jesus said on the cross, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." It goes back to God. In Proverbs 20 and 27 it says, "The spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all the innermost parts of his being." And so we see that the Spirit is the connection between us and God. When God breathed His life into that sculptured soil, a man was revealed. And what came about was a living soul. It says God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. That's God's life. And man became a living soul. Your soul is you, the inner self, the unique self, the real you. The soul was alive because of the divine flow. The thoughts of the soul were God's thoughts. The feelings of the soul were God's feelings. The actions of the soul were God's actions. A oneness of completeness because the soul was completely given over to the governance of God. So if God takes His soil and breathes into it His Spirit, who does it belong to? Is it yours? It's His. In Ezekiel 18 and verse 4, God says, "Behold, all souls are mine." In the context, it's talking about all souls, whether it's the soul caught up in sin or the soul walking in God's righteousness. All souls are His. It's not yours. Do not be caught up in the lie that you can sell your soul to the devil. You can't. It's not yours to sell. It's a lie. But you can, and we have, bought into the devil's lie. This is where things go dreadfully wrong. We bought into Satan's lie that we can take this soul that belongs to God and make it our own. Instead of God being master of our destiny, Lord of our lives and God of our activity, we have become masters of our destiny, Lord of our own lives and the power of our own activity. We took this soul which He created and made it our own. We stole it, as it were, away from Him and snatched it from His hands. There was an illustration of that I experienced recently with a little grade oneer. We were sitting in front of a fireplace and I had my phone there and he's looking at my phone. And I thought, well, he's pretty keen on it. Maybe we can share it together. So as I'm sort of holding my phone down, guess what? He grabs it and snatch. You know, that's what we did with our soul, with God. He's given it to us to live with Him, for Him, together. But we've snatched it away. We've given the soul mastery over us, and it suppresses the spirit. It suppresses the righteousness and the truth. That connection we had with God is suppressed by our own desire to be in control of ourselves. We allowed the soul to captain our lives so that our lives are governed by our own thoughts, our lives are governed by our own feelings, and our lives are empowered by our own actions. Our own mind, will and emotions, which connect our body, soul and spirit, are governed or mastered by our own soul. It takes the place on the throne which belongs to God. We were not created to master our own souls, and we were not created to be controlled by the souls of others. There's another trap. It's the place of a victim being abused. Our soul belongs to God. Now, this is the condition we're in, and there is nothing you can do about it. This flesh, sin nature, needs to die. It needs to be buried. It needs to be drowned. It needs to be burned. It needs to be crucified. We are not the ones to do this. This is where Jesus steps in. He takes all this sin and the law which is against us and nails it to the cross. When we believe in Him by faith, He steps into our lives, casting off that old nature. He now becomes captain of our lives. He is master of our destiny, Lord of our lives, God of our activity. He must now govern our lives so that we think with His thoughts, feel with His emotions, and are active with His power. When we embrace this, hand over the old axes and take on this new life, we are overjoyed, we are amazed, we are enraptured. It's a great thing. But shock horror. Like the man in the story, we take it, this newfound life, this Christianity. And as if we haven't learnt from the past, we take this newfound Christianity and start swinging it like an axe. I don't know how you cut down a tree without the motor going. Swing it, I don't know. But, and I've exaggerated in the start because I don't think you could cut 25 trees down like that. But we try and make it our own, this life, this Christianity. Governing it by our own thoughts, feelings and actions. It doesn't work. It has to stop. You're swinging, blistering, failing, sweating and defeated because the Christian life is not yours to live. It is His to live in you. This is the power, the abundance, the peace, the joy, the victorious life. It is Jesus in you. Not us controlling this life. Him. Tap into the power of that chainsaw. Don't do the effort. Let Him do it. Give it all over to Him. Our soul does not belong to us. The soul is triply His. It's His by creation, it's His by redemption, and it's His by resurrection. A new creation. You are not your own. You have been bought for a price. This price was Christ's life. And that is what we receive. Just give it to Him by faith and live in Him by that faith. Can you see what sin is? It's us in control of our life. That's sin. If we want an eternity with God, without God, we'll have one. We give our lives to Him. He gives His life to us. That's the joy. That's the life. That's the hope. Just grab hold onto Jesus Christ. Let go of yourself. That's sin. And you will be frustrated. You'll experience hell on earth, so to speak. Life's in Him. We're going to stand and sing and there's a great friend that's been brought along today, a wonderful friend, and he walks on water, and his name is Jesus. You know if you need to give your life to Him, maybe re-give it to Him because of walking in your own strength and ability. I'm going to step aside, but if Jesus is calling you to come to Him and embrace Him, you come forward and you embrace Him. Don't embrace me. Don't embrace anyone else here. You embrace Him. I'll step aside, but just give your life to Him and know His life in you.
I'd like to stand.